If you're a parent, you know that the birth of your first child is an incredible experience. For Steve and Camre, it didn't happen at all the way they expected it to. Steve got the call at work that Camre was at the hospital and had already delivered the baby. He dropped everything and drove there frantically, and he was confused because the baby wasn't due for another 7 weeks. He ran into the hospital, and the first thing he saw was his newborn son, Gavin. He quickly scrubbed up and held him for the first time. What Steve didn't know was that, at that moment, Camre was being put into a medically induced coma in order to save her life. He also didn't know that when she would come out of that coma, she would have no memory of anything. She would not recognize Steve, and she wouldn't even know that she had just had their baby. This is a flashback episode. Steve originally told this story on the podcast about 5 years ago, so at the end of today's episode, we'll get to hear from modern-day Steve, and he'll tell us what's happened since then. Real people in unreal situations.
The eerie silence when I walked in, and he's just staring at me.
I was like, hello, like, are you okay? And then I had to tell him it was me.
There was just blood everywhere.
They're shouting, they're screaming, they're being hit by bullets, they're hitting the ground.
And in that moment, I literally thought, this is how I die.
Everything changed then.
And I just thought to myself, this isn't happening.
Every single story deserves to be heard.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Have you always wanted to be a dad?
Since I've been a little kid, I've always wanted to be a dad. I've dreamt of it, swinging on the swing in my backyard. I've had an amazing father, and it's just something that has always been with him inside of me.
And now you're living it.
I am living it, yeah.
Well, we're going to get into the whole story here, but I got to tell you, is prior to this conversation, I got your book that tells this whole story, and it's an awesome book. I highly recommend it. We're going to be, we'll give you people the information about where they can get that here in just a few minutes. And at the beginning of the book, you talk about the night or the time when you first met Camre, and that is so amazing. I'm not even going to I don't want you to tell the story here. I'm going to let people read the book to find out. But
we don't want to ruin it.
It's just incredible the way you two came together, and it was like an instant chemistry.
Yeah.
You started dating, and then what's amazing, you planned this proposal for her to ask you to be your wife. And the incredible part is that all that effort that you put into it to make it memorable, and she doesn't remember any of it, right?
That's correct. Yeah. I really put some thought into it. We lived on a private little lake. We had this small little 2-bedroom cabin built in 1920. It was this cool little cabin lake home that we lived in, and we would always go on the water. And I kind of decorated our boat, our pontoon boat, as the Love Boat. It was on the 4th of July. It's a free fireworks show. And I told her, "Oh wow, look at that firework!" And she turned around, and I dropped down on a knee on her boat, and I proposed. And it was a memorable moment. It was something that anybody who gets engaged, these are things you don't forget. Luckily, I have a few pictures of that, of the Love Boat, of the sign, and I just wrote it on a piece of paper, put some tape, nothing too fancy, but it was the thought, and it was a special night for sure.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about, she became pregnant, and there were some problems during the pregnancy. And can you just talk about what happened?
Shortly after, she became pregnant, and we were on cloud nine. We were excited. She was excited to be a mom, and I was excited to be a dad. And our families were excited. Now, I was 31 years old at this time, or 30 years old. And I think my mom thought, I don't know, time's running out, Stephen. You're not. So she already had 4 other grandkids, all boys. And so Camre, we became pregnant. She became pregnant, and it was just kind of going through the first trimester was really good. The second trimester was really good. And we were just kind of cruising along. And as a first-time father, you really don't think about it. You just think, oh, you get pregnant like everybody else I see, and they have the baby, and then you become a parent, and you go on in your life. Well, for us, the third trimester hit her like a ton of bricks. She started to develop nausea. She was constantly throwing up, and she just couldn't hold food down. So we would constantly bring her into the hospital, back and forth. And they eventually put a Zofran pump on her to kind of keep the food in her, and so she doesn't throw up constantly. So it was shortly after that we had the baby shower, and that day, she couldn't even make that day. So she was on bed rest.
That's got to be devastating that she couldn't go to her own baby shower.
Yeah, I only opened a few gifts, and I left the rest for her. I took them back, and we opened up together. That way she still has that feeling of the baby, that way I didn't have to do everything. So it was shortly after that, a couple weeks after, where she developed some swelling into her throat. And that's when our real problems started to happen.
You really didn't know what the problem was at that point, right? Not
at all. Well, we were constantly going back and forth to the hospital or to the OBGYN, and it was the same thing. Here's some, we'll rehydrate you, send you home. Rehydrate you, send you home. She had some swelling in her feet because she stood around for work. So they had her on bed rest. I didn't know what to expect. My expectations were, I think they were at the time where she's, everything's going to be all right. She's going to be fine. I wasn't too worried.
Neither of you had gone through a pregnancy before. And often, that's common here. When you're pregnant, you throw up sometimes. So it was no reason to think anything really unusual was happening.
Yeah, and she's such a strong person. She plays it off so well. Like, yeah, I'm fine. But she's throwing up. As she's throwing up, she's telling me she's fine, right? And that's just the type of person she is. She's incredible. She's very strong, and she's strong-willed. And so I was like, okay, she's fine, because she kept telling me she's fine, and I believed her. So it was shortly after that. She had some swelling develop in her throat. We got her to the emergency room. They ran tests. Blood pressure seemed to be fine. Everything. They didn't know what it was. They thought maybe it can be an allergic reaction to the Zofran pump. They didn't have the answers yet. So they kept her in the hospital overnight just for observation. And that afternoon, she actually, the next day, the afternoon, she ended up having a grand mal seizure. And she's never had seizures before. She had a grand mal seizure with our child inside of her. She had undiagnosed preeclampsia. She actually went eclamptic. Her blood pressure skyrocketed to the roof. Had a grand mal seizure.
When this all happened, you were at work.
Yeah, I was at work.
I know she was in the hospital, but you had to go to work. So
this time she was on bed rest, and we had a house together. Well, she was just staying with her parents. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. Her mom was at home, so her mom can kind of keep an eye on her all the time. So I had to go take care of our dogs that night. Camre, being herself, she goes, "Go home, take care of the dogs, go to work tomorrow." And I'm like, I'm like, okay. So I went to work, and I was going to work a half day, and I was going to come up back to the hospital. And that's when I got the phone call from, Camry texted me an hour before this happened. She told me she loves me, she's fine, the baby's fine, everything's fine, she's doing great. And then an hour later, I get a phone call from my mom on my work cell phone that frantically, basically crying and screaming that Camry had the baby. And I just dropped. I was in shock, and I just hopped in my truck, and I drove 90 miles an hour to that hospital. I ran from the parking lot to the delivery room, and as I ran into the delivery room, I put my hands on my knees because I was out of breath, and they were wheeling in Gavin as soon as I ran right into him.
So that's when you saw him for the first time, when you first ran into the hospital?
Yeah, 2 nurses were wheeling him into the NIC unit. And I just kind of dropped to my knees, and at the time, I looked at him, and they say, "Are you Steve?" I said, "Yep." And then "This is your son, Gavin, but we got to take him into the room. Go wash your hands. Wait for us to call you. We'll put a wristband on you, and you can meet your son." So that's kind of how that's how we met.
Man, I just can't imagine the overwhelming confusion and emotions. This is meeting your son for the first time and not knowing what this Camry situation is, just overwhelming.
Very overwhelming. I was asking the doctors and the nurses, okay, how's Camry? Because they're telling me Gavin's fine. And they're like, we don't know yet. She's in the ICU. She's in a medically induced coma. She had a seizure. They saved the baby. She's alive. And then that's basically the information I got. So I put my focus at this time just for a few minutes. I got a chance to meet Gavin, and he grabbed my finger very tightly. And my first thought when I looked at him, he looked just like his mother. I called him Camre Jr. And it brought the biggest smile to my face. He was healthy. He was 4 pounds, 1 ounce. He was premature. He was 7 weeks early. And he was 16 and a half inches long. But he was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was instantly in love. So I brought all the family one by one coming to meet him. We weren't able to go upstairs yet because they were doing their tests and everything with Camry. Finally, we got to go in that room, and it was just that if anybody's been in a hospital before, you got the beeping and it's just kind of this, from this happiest moment of your life to now the saddest moment in your life in the same day, because you're realizing when you get a visual that you're looking at the woman you love, and she's in a medically induced coma, and she just gave birth to your son. And then I have this instant guilt that I wasn't there, which for a long time I kind of blamed myself. But then I realized over a period of time that, hey, there's really nothing I would have been able to do anyways. But at the same time, you kind of wish I was there.
Yeah, of course, as a father and a husband, of course you'd want to be there. But as you said, over this time, you've realized even if you were there, there's nothing you could do. And it was 7 weeks before she was due anyway. It's not like you could spend all your time in the hospital.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. And I was at the hospital most of the night before. I mean, I left at it was like 1 a.m. So I was there for a long time. So I got to take care of the dog. So that's why I left. That's kind of where I found myself, is going in between seeing our son and then to seeing Camry in this coma.
And then that kind of began a period of a lot of mystery as to what her condition was and what caused it and what the long-term prognosis would be. It seems like your overwhelming feeling was frustration at just not getting answers.
Yeah, we were not getting any answers because they didn't know. That was the frustrating part, is you put all this, this trust in the doctors, and they just had no idea what happened. I mean, they know that she had a seizure. They put her in a coma. They saved her life and Gavin's life, but they didn't know the extent of her injuries. In fact, they didn't even know she had a brain injury. So that night, I spent the night in the hospital. I slept next to Camry's bed, as well as the next night. And that next day, day and a half, they pulled the tube out of her throat, and they let the morphine wear off and the drugs wear off. And then we noticed something wasn't right. She was hallucinating. She was talking to her hand. She wasn't coherent. She didn't know that she just had a child. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know her parents. She didn't know anything. She thought she was in church. So she didn't even know she was in a hospital. So we were obviously like, okay, we want some answers. And they're like, whoa, we don't know. Let's get the psychiatrist. So they got the psychiatrist, and he kind of quick diagnoses that he thought that she had postpartum depression psychosis. So that's when we didn't even know what that was at the time. And then we were just kind of going with it. We're like, okay, so there's an answer. We believed that was the problem. But shortly after...
Yeah, because what else can you do when a doctor tells you something? What else can you do other than say, well,
just okay,
he's the expert, right?
Yeah, apparently. But finds out he was not an expert. But so from the time that Camry gave birth to the time she was in this hospital was about 5 days. 5 or 6 days. And during that time, we just really weren't getting any answers. And in fact, she even went from, she was kind of coherent, and we tried to let her meet Gavin for the first time, but it just wasn't, she was just not right. something wasn't right, and everything was going wrong. So we ended up having her life flighted to a different hospital because a trauma hospital, because we just thought, you know what, something's not right here. And we found out, yeah, she suffered a severe brain injury and she lost all of her memory.
And the other hospital was more equipped with neurologists and people that could tell what was going on better.
Yeah, the hospital we're at, well, it was not that they were bad. It was more of a residency hospital where it's just people, it's like a learning hospital. So at that hospital, Camre was more like a guinea pig. They're trying to figure out what's going on. The other hospital, they just laid down the law. They said, move out of my way. We're going to figure this out. And they just were so confident. And they did. Within days, they figured out that she suffered a traumatic brain injury, severe brain injury from loss of oxygen because her throat was swelled up. So when she had that grand mal seizure, she lost oxygen to her brain. With that oxygen, suffered a stroke. And that's what happened.
And all of this leads back to the preeclampsia, which was not diagnosed.
Which was not diagnosed, no. It was undiagnosed.
Has anyone told you, why was this? Why did they miss that? Do you know?
No, we don't know. We never really pursued that issue. We had a lot going on. We were asking questions. We have the medical records and stuff. We were trying to figure stuff out, but we never really figured out exactly what happened. But we do know that this was from most of our information came from the other hospital. So that's how we kind of learned everything.
You sent me a picture of you holding Gavin.
Yeah. And
that was when you held him for the first time. When you look at that picture now, what do you think of?
I think of a dad for the first time not knowing the journey that he's about to embark on. Unbeknownst to me at that time, I had no idea Camre even had a brain injury in that photo. I was just happy to be a dad. I was happy my son was alive. I was happy that Camre was alive fighting for her life in the ICU because she still was alive. So I see a dad who's just beyond happy, beyond blessed, but at the same time not knowing what the future holds for him and not knowing the journey that he's about to go on. And it has been an incredible journey.
I get the impression from you that you are a natural optimist. Is that how you would describe yourself too?
Yeah, I look forward. I don't try not to look behind me too much. I think that with hard work, and I'm a firm believer in God and Jesus Christ, and I have a lot of faith that has been built that's inside of me, and I try to think in positive thoughts and not negative. So negative thoughts will just bring you down a rabbit hole you do not want to go down. I think the word that best described for me that's helped me is hope. I always have hope that things are going to get better. If they might not be good today, but you know what? They could be possibly better tomorrow. And I'm willing to hope that they will be. So I think hope's a good word.
I think so too. And it's really, when you're in a situation like that, that's the best way to look at it. Because otherwise you could just crawl into a corner in a fetal position and just give up, and probably some people would.
Yeah, I think giving up's the easy route, though, right? I mean, life's not easy. So I've always been a competitive person, but not with people, just within myself. So if I give up, I get disappointed in myself, and I don't like being disappointed in myself. I mean, sure, we all have disappointments, but I really try to just think positive and have that faith. And really, really put my faith in God and knowing that He has a plan for myself and not only for me, and now it's for my family.
Can you talk about when you first started, Camre's out of the coma now, and you would go into her room and try to communicate with her. What was that like in the early stages?
Well, it's difficult because she didn't know who I was. So when I was trying to communicate with her, so when she's out of the coma, I'm trying to tell her, hey, you just gave birth to the most beautiful little boy. And she would look at his picture and she would smile at it, but she would not know who he was. I would introduce myself and she would not know who I am. And when we learned that she suffered that brain injury and then she had no memory and it happened just beyond her memory lobes, life took a crazy turn because I was just heartbroken that the woman who made me a better person, that I love deeply now, and we just had a child together, now doesn't know who our own child is, or myself. So it was tough talking to her because she didn't know who I was. I was just, hi, I'm Steve, and it was like nothing would register at all. So it was a tough time.
What's amazing is that even though she didn't have memory of anything or didn't really know why she was there, she wasn't afraid of all these apparent strangers who were talking to her and everything.
She was so positive. She had a smile on her face. She didn't freak out. She just went with it. And she just kept going with it. You could tell her something and she'd be like, okay. But then she would forget what you told her right there. So it really didn't matter. She was just this happy little, she was, just person. When I think back to that time and when she finally got released from the hospital, I would constantly remind her who I am, that we had a child. Now at this time too, I was working. So she had moved back in with her parents. She didn't know we had a house. She didn't know we had a child. So we were the beginning stages after she got home. She got home before Gavin. Gavin was still in the hospital. She got home within like 30 days and Gavin was like 35 days. So that 5 days, I would pick her up from her parents' house after I get done working and I would bring her she didn't know who I was. She didn't want to get in the car with me. So I would try to convince her like, hey, I'm okay. And her parents would say, hey, she didn't really know her parents, but she trusted her mom, it seemed. So our mom was like, this is Steve. In fact, we weren't even married. We were engaged to be married at this time. So she wasn't even my wife. She was my fiance. And she would just hop in the car eventually. We would go drive up there and she's like, where are we? Where are we going? Who are you? We'd get to the hospital. Okay, where are we at? Who are you? Where are we going? And it's just this constant, what's going on? She just had these questions of what's going on constantly because she literally had only at that time, maybe, 30 seconds of memory, long and short. So it was just this constant, she had so many questions, but they were the same question over and over again. Like, where are we at? Who are you? Who is this child?
And she didn't even know she was asking the same question over and over.
No, because she would forget. It's hard. Even when I talk about it, it's hard to wrap your mind around that. If you lose all your memory, we hear stories of people losing memory, but I don't think in this capacity when you lose all your memory. And not only when you lose it, you keep losing it within seconds and seconds and seconds. And then, over a long period of time, then it was a minute. And then she had but you can't time it exactly. There's no rule of thumb to her memory loss. It's just the way it is. And
right,
you just have to accept it.
But this is what I just find so fascinating about this whole story, the mental aspect of it. So you guys would get to the hospital and she would still, she would ask you again, where are we? Why are we here? But yet she knew about a car. She knew she was traveling. And
I don't think she did. No, I don't think she knew she was traveling. I just think she would forget instantly. It was an instant, just forget. And she was just like kind of in the, just just kind of out of it. And it's really hard to describe. It really is because you really kind of have to see it and live it. But she questioned where she was and where she's going and who people are, but she never questioned okay, I'm hopping in this car. Do I have to, she never really overly questioned. She was just more curious of who are you? She had this trust. She trusted people. She had this innocence about her, right? She had this innocence about her. She was just this beautiful, innocent woman who had no idea who she, myself, her family, her whole life was gone. Everything. She lost everything. Still to this day, she still doesn't remember her childhood or our son's life. All these memories are still gone.
At some point, it seemed like you saw progress because she was starting to remember her own name. Was that the first sign that she might get better?
Yeah. Now, of course, like I've told you before, I was always hopeful that she's going to improve. Yeah, she was only 24 when this happened. So she had age and time on her hands. So over a period of time, she remembered her own name. Like, okay, I'm Camre. And she would even question. She said, okay, my name is Camre? Yes, you are Camre. Okay. And she got that repetition about who she is. And she started there, and it kind of worked. It just kind of kept going. And there was these little defining moments when you look back of her knowing her name, and then her telling, like the title of our book, her telling me that she doesn't know who I am, but she knows she loves me. And her accepting the fact she would just go with me when I would pick her up eventually. She would just come over, and she trusted me. And we were starting to be a family. The first year, she lived at her parents' house for well over a year. She would just kind of come over and hang out for a few hours, and then her parents would pick her up, or I would drop her off. So I was responsible for Gavin. I've raised Gavin. It was just me and Gavin at nights, and then I would drop him off at either daycare or her parents' house, and kind of do that cycle for we've done that for a long time.
So that's kind of that was your routine at the time.
We had a routine where I worked 6 days a week, 5 to 6 days a week, and Gavin would be with me at night. I would then take him Camry, or just take him depending on if she came over. In the beginning stages, she wouldn't come with me because she didn't know who I was. She eventually started to trust me because I showed up every day. I think part of our story too is just showing up every day and not going away, not giving up, just showing up. And I always showed up. I was always at her parents' house, ready to pick her up. Even if she didn't want to go with me, I was ready to pick her up and ready to get Gavin and go start our family life at our house. And then it wasn't ideal. It wasn't an ideal situation that it's not what I wanted, obviously, but I was happy enough and thankful enough that I still had my family intact. And that's what meant the most to me. And I was willing and still am willing to do anything to keep my family together.
And that's got to be, I think about this from the perspective of her parents and seeing their daughter have to go through this, but they have to be just so incredibly relieved to have someone like you saying, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm here for her for the rest of her life. That's what I'm committed to, and I'm going to take care of her.
Yeah, I re-proposed to her. I talked to her dad. I said, I love your daughter. I love Camry. She was the one when I first met her. I knew it right off the bat. So I think, we have developed a fantastic relationship.
Was this about the time when she came home, and so you guys were all living at the same house?
Like the year, it took about a year for her to move back in.
Okay.
It actually took longer for her to move back in. She just brought a to-go bag. So she would spend the night. She started spending the night, but it took, 9 months for her to spend the night. So that first, say 10 months, she just brought a to-go bag. She would come over for a few hours, and then it would just kind of be me and Gavin at night. And so, like, I did all the, I got up every night. I did all the burping, the feeding, the bathing, everything. I was like mom and dad.
When their seizures started, was that after she had come back and was spending the night at your house, or was that before she came back for good?
That was a year after her brain injury. She had her first seizure while she was at her parents' house during the day. Obviously, the ambulance came, all that, went to the hospital. And then she just started having seizure after seizure after seizure. So then it was just, and this is where her parents are fantastic. They, she was at her parents' house while I was working. So it gave me the opportunity to still make a living, still take care of Gavin, and that they were taking to her doctor's appointments during those days. And a lot of times her mom had Gavin too. and she would be at the doctor's with Camry, with the little baby. So she had her hands full as well. So, it hasn't just been all me, it takes a village, they say. But yeah, that's when she started developing epilepsy, and then getting on different seizure medications, and then entailed, the dosage of these medications are insane. Like she, couldn't walk right, walking sideways, it would knock her out. These medications are just.
So those were side effects?
These are side effects. Yeah. Side effects are memory loss, nausea, dizziness, and she's only like 110 pounds. So when you're taking 2,000 milligrams of seizure meds, because her seizures are really bad, they developed, first year she was no seizures, and then boom, it hit her like a ton of bricks, and she was having seizures every other day. And not just little, it's grand mal seizures. So then our lives took a turn where trying to figure epilepsy out, and not only when she was with me, taking care of Gavin, but then she's having seizures. She's on the floor seizing, or in the car seizing, or we're out, grocery shopping or something, having seizures there. So then just seizures were a part of our lives, and they still are to this day.
And she kind of can tell when one is coming on.
Yeah. She knows she has this aura, she calls it. And she'll take she has this little Ativan medicine she takes to hopefully kind of subside the seizures. It usually just cuts the seizure, down, the timing down. But she used to, in the beginning, have like 12-minute long grand mal seizures. She knows when they're coming, and she'll say like, "Hey." So anytime I hear the word "hey," I freak out, because it's just, I'm on edge. I'm always like,
right.
It happens quite often.
How far in advance does she know? Like when she says, "Hey," how much time do you have?
Seconds. Because she'll stand for a while. I can tell you, she's strong. She'll stand and have a seizure. It's like she does not want to fall. But eventually, if I wasn't there, she would just tip over. But she's always looking for somebody. Like if she does, like if she's in the other room and I hear "hey," she's already standing up and kind of coming towards me. She's trying to find me. So, and I usually just carry her and get her to a safe location. Over time now, our son has dealt with quite a lot of seizures. He's seen a lot, and so he deals with them really well. He'll get her a blanket, a pillow, and kind of prop her feet up and just say, "It's okay, mommy," and he's really good with it. So it's been his whole life, really.
Partway through, or after a while, you became concerned just from the legal aspect that you were not a husband, you were a fiance still. Yeah. Can you talk about your thought process there and what happened?
Well, I asked her dad again to repropose. So I did another proposal on another July 4th, and it was just in front of all our family. And it was just to show, I was so dedicated, and I still am, to her and our family. And I wanted her to be my wife, not just my fiance. I've been waiting for so long. We've been through so much. It took 3.5 years after her brain injury for us to get married, but even the first proposal was still another 2 years after that. But it was when I know that she knew who I was, she knew my name, she knew who Gavin was, she knew our life together, she knew where we lived, she was improving, she showed tremendous signs of improvement, and she was doing, she was getting better, and she was on the road to recovery. Even though she might not remember the day before, she was becoming more aware of her surroundings and kind of what happened to her. Because that took a long time for her to remember that she couldn't remember.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about the same thing. Does she ever ask, why can't I remember things? But now she knows.
Now she knows. She didn't. So she would ask questions like, "So what, I have a brain injury." You would tell her she has a brain injury, and she would not remember that she has a brain injury, or she couldn't remember. And you explain to her, "You lost all your memory," and she's like, "I lost my memory." And she had a hard time, and then it just kind of faded away, like within, shortly after you would tell her. And so she couldn't remember that she couldn't remember because she had short and long-term memory loss. So she couldn't do it. But over time, as her brain is healed and she's becoming more and more and more aware of her surroundings and what happened to her, she remembers now. She knows exactly what happened. And, I'm not going to say it's easy for her because it's not. It's actually gotten, when you start realizing, she's starting to realize what she lost, and she's realizing what she lost, and she lost her whole life. She lost her son's childhood. She doesn't remember her son's childhood, or her own. So that's a tough pill to swallow for her. And but I give her credit, because huge credit. She doesn't give up. She always is constantly, she has her bad days, but she always is moving forward. And I try to be that positive light in her life. And she has her son. She does it for our child, where she wants, even though that she might not remember doing things with Gavin, she knows that Gavin has a memory. And so she does it for him. And so she's just incredible.
Do you do a lot of video so that she can look at this and say, yep, that's when we did that day? Or?
We take a lot of photos. We have some videos here and there. We just do a lot of photos. The hard part about photos, though, is she can't place herself in that photo. For like me and you, we can go back like, oh, look, we're on the beach, and this day, this whatever. For her, she goes, how did I get to the beach? Where were we? What were we doing? What's behind? There's nothing behind that photo. But, we have our wedding video, which was an amazing day, which she, again, doesn't remember. But we have the video, and she watches constantly.
Do you ever try to, like, you guys took a vacation to Clearwater Beach, which is like 20 minutes from me, actually.
Is it?
And I know you're up in Michigan, up where it's cold, but but you guys went to Clearwater Beach. Do you ever try to? And she doesn't remember any of it.
No.
But do you?
That was before the brain injury.
Right. Yeah. That was way before.
Yeah.
But do you try to kind of recreate those things for her now so that she does have a memory of it? No. I know obviously it's not the same thing as going through it, but does she remember now that? I mean, she doesn't remember actually doing it, but does she know that you went to Clearwater Beach that one time?
If I tell her, she'll believe me. She's like, "Did we?" Because I don't lie to her. I stay very, very honest and very. I keep it real with her, and so I'm not going to sit here and try to recreate her memories. All I can do, I think that was kind of where the book came into play, where she doesn't have our 10-year relationship, so that's kind of why I wrote it out. But I think it's for us is trying to live in the moment and make these moment memories, make these, these just, whether it's going on vacation, we go to Great Wolf Lodge with our child or go up to her. We have a cabin up north. We were just in Florida. She has family in Sanford, Florida. We were just in Florida past June for Grandpa, and a lot of her family lives out in Sanford. And we were just out there, and she might not remember it, but we're living in the moment. We're not taking life for granted anymore. We appreciate every day, every opportunity, everything, every blessing that it's gone our way. We appreciate everything. So I think that's the difference. I'm not going to recreate anything. I tried to recreate the engagement. I didn't recreate it on the boat. I just did something different. And it's just doing new things and trying new things. And hopefully, one day these memories will stick. Hopefully we can, we're working towards beating epilepsy. Like I said, these side effects of seizure meds are memory loss. So if we can get rid of some of these, maybe some more memories in there, and we'll get it out of her. So again, I'm hopeful for great things in the future. I'm hopeful she'll drive one day. I'm hopeful that, now she's, sometimes we can leave her alone with her child. It took 5 years just to be left alone with her own child. So we're just grateful, for anything. And anything that comes our way, we're, positive or negative, we just keep moving.
The brain is a pretty amazing thing, and we don't even know how amazing it is.
Oh,
so
it is.
Who knows how it can retrain and recreate itself to heal and come back from this. Obviously, she's made lots of progress since the very beginning. How long does her memory go back now?
Couple days.
Yeah, and before it was seconds or less than a minute.
It was seconds. She can think back to something we did like a week ago, but she can't tell you, did we do it a week ago? She doesn't know when we did it. She can't, how we can kind of categorize like, oh, that was, if we really think about it, it was, oh yeah, I think we did that last Wednesday, or, but you did it, the specifics. I think she just knows it's like a shadow. She knows maybe she did something, but then over time, that kind of that memory or shadow just kind of disappears. But if we have a picture of it and she can look back, even though she might not remember actually doing it, but she knows that she's living life and she's doing things. And I think her goal is just to get better, try to get healthier. She wants to get better. She's strong. She's a fighter. She's getting better, and she just wants to take some stress off me. Because I have all the weight of everything's on my shoulders, and she knows that, but it's not her fault. And she wants to be a mom.
Does she struggle with guilt because of you having to do all the work?
Yeah, she wished she could do more. But I think from my standpoint is I try to include her in like everything. We have a joint calendar. So if something's going on, I put her on it so she knows. We do a lot of things together. So yeah, she wishes she can do more. She wishes she could just drive Gavin to school, and she wants to go to the school and, be that mom that all these other moms, she sees these other moms with their kids alone driving. That hurts her because she wants that so bad, but she just can't have it right now. So I'm
not yet.
So yeah, not yet, but she'll have it in the future. I know she will.
If you knew in the beginning what you were about to go through over the next several years, would you think you could handle it?
First of all, I'd tell you you're crazy because it's been an unbelievable journey. I don't know. I think I've handled it pretty well.
I think you have too.
Yeah, Scott.
For what that's worth.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, for me, it's always been about family, and just keeping our family together. We had this dream when we became pregnant, how happy we were when we found out Gavin was going to be a boy. We picked out his name together. We did all these things together, and I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want my son not to grow up without his mom, and I didn't want to live a life without the girl who I loved, and even though she might have not known who I was, I knew who she was, and I knew how strong she was. So I wasn't going to give up on that, and I never will.
I think it's great that you've written a book to describe this whole journey. What was her reaction in reading that book?
Well, she did. She's read it 3 times. She doesn't remember the book yet, but if she keeps reading it, she's going to get I think that was my mindset behind it. She keeps reading it. It's rote memory. She keeps doing it. She'll remember our 10-year life together. And then maybe in another 10 years, we'll write another book. But she enjoyed it. At the same time, I will be honest, it does remind her of what she lost at the same time. So it's this, wow, look what we've been through. She loves the fact that I wrote her a book and that I wrote a book. But at the same time, she realizes I don't remember this stuff. And that's hard. That's hard for her. So it's kind of, that catch-22, but she handles it very well.
What amazes me, this is a lot of this, the parts of this story, it's kind of a medical story and a neurological story, but really, above all, it's a love story.
It is, yeah.
All right, so this book, it's called But I Know I Love You, and that was because of a particular thing that happened, which you can talk about if you want to, but how do people find the book and where can they order it?
Well, the title of the book comes from a time early on when she came home from the hospital and she was at her parents' house, and I was trying to get her to come home. She did not want to come back home with me. And I was sitting on her couch and she just looked at me and says, I don't know who you are, but I know I love you. And that was this defining moment. And for me personally, because she didn't know who I was, but she said she loves me, I'm taking it. And that was another, this huge amount of hope that I've always kept inside of me, knowing that she loves me and that we're going to build a new relationship and a new love. So that's where the title actually came from, is But I Know I Love You. The book is available on Amazon. I self-published it on our wedding anniversary, on our 4th wedding anniversary. And it just describes our 10-year journey that we've been on from the first time I met her, from our first date, from baby shower to the birth of Gavin, and then some other defining moments in our life. And the feedback has been incredible. I did not expect our book to get this much publicity, I didn't know what to expect. I think I was kind of naive to the fact. I just, I was hopeful that people would just read it and enjoy it. I think that's what I want. And I think that's what's happening. I think people are actually enjoying the book. So it's been incredible. It's just another blessing from God and in our family. They just keep coming. So.
Yeah. And I think people enjoy the book because it's such an amazing story. And, we can talk about it here for 45 minutes or an hour, but of course you go into a lot more detail in what actually happened and what you were going through and everything.
Yeah.
So people can find this on Amazon. You have a website too. What is that?
ButIknowILoveYou.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at But I Know I Love You on Facebook. I upload some family photos and, just kind of maybe some articles that share our story. But I think in the future, it's going to be more of just, if you want to follow our family, you can, I'll put some photos here and there. I don't overdo it because I'm not like I don't put everything on there. I'm not that guy, but I just put a few family photos here and there, and so you can get a little insight of our life.
So how old is Gavin now?
Gavin's 7 years old now, which is incredible to think. I can't believe he's 7.
7.
Yeah.
Man.
Time flies.
I can tell you from personal experience, blink your eyes and he's going to be off to college.
Yeah. Everybody, even when he was first born, everybody says, enjoy it while it lasts. Because before you know it, he's going to be 18. He's going to be moving out. So I think that's the mindset as a parent. And I think for most parents is you just want to raise your child, build them up right, put the faith in them, and give them the confidence to succeed in this world. Because we do live in a crazy world and anything can happen and life's not guaranteed. And, we're extremely proud of him. He is such a good kid. He's good in school. He has one of the warmest hearts for a 7-year-old you'd probably ever meet. So he's an incredible child and we're just extremely grateful that he's ours.
I'm going to have links to all of what we've talked about here. We'll have some pictures on the website in the show notes for this episode.
Okay.
So people can check that out. And if they want to contact you, they can do that through the website as well. And it's great to hear. You guys are, people say just, live in the moment, live for today. And you guys are doing it on a pretty literal basis.
Every day, and more for her, obviously, than me, because I can reflect back. But for her, it does make me and what happened in our lives not take life for granted and really appreciate each moment we do. Even if it's little, it's putting up our Christmas tree. Every year I don't take anything for granted. Every moment I cherish everything that's been in our lives. So I'm just extremely blessed, grateful, and thankful that things are going well.
Steve, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
It's been several years since we spoke, and I'm sure the thing that everyone is wondering is how is Camre doing now?
She is doing much better. Her short-term memory has improved. Long-term, still the same. As the days and weeks go by, she does forget these events. But in the meantime, the short-term, which really for the day-to-day, to have a good quality of life, she's doing much better.
And I remember when we spoke last, she was having seizures from time to time. Has that gotten worse or better, or what's the status of that?
Yeah, they have gotten better. The overall length of them and the severity of them. For example, she did have a seizure this morning, actually. Lasted a minute. I gave her some Ativan. She came out of it, but they're not the 6 to 8, 12-minute long grand mal seizures. They've evolved into not as bad. She did have a couple brain surgeries a few years back. She had RNS implanted into her head. It's a regional nerve stimulator, and that has really been life-changing for not only her, but for me too, and our family.
Does that work to shorten the seizures, or what's the effect of that?
Yeah, so what it does is, it takes several years and appointments to get it. There was a brain surgery for a testing to see where the seizures are coming from, where they drilled 20 holes in her head, stuck these rods in. We stayed at the hospital for 10 days. They weaned her off her seizure meds, and then she seized. They captured where the seizures are coming from. So once they get that data, then they implant this device, and they put the rods right where the seizures are occurring, and it detects the electrical pulse. That's what seizures are. They're just like a negative electrical pulse. It detects that, and it sends out this frequency, and it kind of massages that area, and it works throughout the day, because you could have 1,000 seizures a day, and some of them, a lot of them, they don't even break through, but it helps the ones that are breaking through. So it's just implanted in the back of her skull, and then 2 rods in both sides of her brain. She has seizures occurring from both sides.
You must be just astounded at how our lives are benefiting from technology now.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't even think it would be hard for me to leave the house with her, the way she was having seizures. I mean, for many years, it was difficult. Technology has definitely helped us out tremendously.
And tell us about your son, Gavin. I think he was only 7 maybe when we did the podcast.
Yeah, I think he was about 6. He's now 12. So it's been about that long since we've last talked. So he's 12 years old. He's in 6th grade. He's a really great kid. We do get compliments all the time of how well behaved, and he uses manners, and Camre and I are extremely proud of him. He's just a wonderful kid.
I've seen on your Facebook that he is a golfer. He
is. He's a good little golfer. He's won some trophies. He really enjoys golfing. He's been golfing since he's been 4. I enjoy golf, and it was something that we just started kind of doing together, and it's actually great. It works out for both of us in that aspect. But no, he's a really good kid. He loves to cook, and he has a good group of friends. So yeah, he's in 6th grade, and he's getting all A's and B's right now, and he's on the right road. So he's a really good kid. We're super proud of him.
I want to ask you one more thing. I understand there's a possibility that there's going to be a movie about your story. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a possibility. A couple producers from Hollywood reached out to us, and just, we're very interested in the story. Obviously, it's a pretty unique situation and story we find ourselves in here. So yeah, it was a few years ago. I don't know. It could fizzle out. Honestly, who knows? But we do have some interest, and we did sign something with a couple of producers that we have a director on board, the director who Age of Adeline, and I think they made the movie Tag. And so, I mean, these are legit guys, but again, it's Hollywood. This could disappear and quicker than you know it. So I don't put all my eggs in that basket, but obviously something to think about down the road. It could be cool.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to think about for sure. And you're right. A lot of these things, they start off and then they just never end up happening. But okay, so who would play your part? Who do you think?
Well, you have to be good looking. So I'd say, Brad Pitt. I'm just kidding. I don't know. who knows?
Well, who knows? But you're right. It's a fun thing to think about. And man, if it ever does happen, I will definitely promote it on the show so people can go hear it or go watch it because, everybody here's interested in your story.
Yeah, no, I would. I'd let you know if that ever came to fruition. I don't know if it will, but yeah, it is something, fun to think about.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you coming back on, giving us an update. And I wish you continued success. Good luck with Gavin. You're heading into the teen years. That's always fun.
Thank you. I appreciate having me back on. And yeah, well, this is the fun part, right?
In the episode notes, you can see an updated picture of Steve, Camre, and Gavin. That's at whatwasthatlike.com/212. If you're in the podcast Facebook group, you probably saw the Tuesday question I posted earlier this week. What's the worst secondhand embarrassment you've ever felt? In some ways, it can feel worse to be embarrassed for someone else than it feels to be embarrassed for yourself. If you've had that feeling, come on over and tell us what happened in the comments. The group is free to join. whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. Graphics for this episode were created by Bob Bretz. Full episode transcription was created by James Lai. All right, let's just get to the listener story, shall we? I know that's what you're waiting for. It's one of my favorite segments, too. If you have an interesting story you can tell in 5 to 10 minutes, I'd love to play it here for all the other listeners. Just record it on your phone and email it to scott@whatwasthatlike.com. This week's story came from a previous episode. Back in 2021, I did a whole episode filled with crazy birth stories. If you haven't heard that one, go check it out. And today's listener story is one of the stories from that episode. Stay safe, and I'll see you back here next week with all new episodes on Tuesday and Friday.
This is Kristen, and this is the story of my first time giving birth. So actually, I was born at home, and I think that really influenced my ideas about what I wanted my giving birth experience to be like. So when I was pregnant, I was planning for a home birth. And my parents drove out to Denver, where we lived, and they were going to be there for the birth of my baby and a little bit after to meet their newest grandchild. So the day that I was in labor, my mom and dad were there. My mom was making me food and rubbing my back. And it was just really nice to have my mom there. And we were in touch with the midwife a little bit throughout the day, but every time we talked to her, she said, "Oh, it sounds like textbook early labor." So later in the day, my water broke. And so that was one of the indications of calling the midwife to say, "Come now." So we did. And so she said, okay, she was on her way. And then after they hung up, my mom told my husband, "You need to call her back. I am seeing something when Kristen has a contraction." So we called her back, and she told my husband to put her off speakerphone. I think the concern was that what my mom was seeing was the umbilical cord, but I still could hear her even though it was on normal. The phone was on normal level, and I heard her say, "Kristen needs to push really hard for her next contraction." So the next contraction came, and a foot came out. So the midwife said, "Hang up and call 911." So we hung up and called 911. They were on their way. We called the midwife back, and she stayed on the phone with my husband the whole rest of her drive over. And she got there and immediately put the Doppler in my belly, which is what hears the baby's heart rate. And the baby's heart rate was fine, which was a really good sign that the baby was not in distress. And then about a minute or two later, the paramedics got there, and ultimately I ended up having to climb off the bed with a foot sticking out of my body, get a robe on, get on the gurney. They wheeled me to the ambulance. We took an ambulance ride to the hospital. My husband followed quickly behind and wheeled me. Once we got to the hospital, I was wheeled to the operating room, and the doctor said, "I think she's going to deliver this baby breech, but I just need to check the positioning first," which was the most painful thing up until that point I had experienced. And that's when they discovered that the baby was not only breech, but sunny side up. And then the other leg was externally rotated and bent kind of like in tree pose from yoga. So he said to me, "We're putting you under and we're getting this baby out now." Finally, they put a thing over my face, and I finally went out. I don't remember that really. But the next thing I knew, I woke up and my husband was holding this squishy little thing and said, "You have a baby girl." We had kept the sex of the baby a surprise. So I was pretty altered from the anesthesia and then the drugs because, I had an emergency C-section. So obviously I had drugs in my body. So meeting my baby in the first couple of days were all kind of a haze, which I don't particularly love. But I have a safe, healthy baby who's now 4.5. And then 3 years later, I did get my home birth experience. I had a successful VBAC with my son, which stands for vaginal birth after cesarean, and successfully delivered a baby at home. So that's it. My first home birth turned into an emergency C-section of a breech baby who's now still just a little Spitfire, amazing spirit. And my son is a little mischievous little guy. Thanks for listening.